This is step number 4 out of this series on 5 critical steps to take before retiring. My name's Doug Andrew. I've been a financial strategist and retirement planning specialist for more than 4.5 decades. And years ago, I developed a very powerful educational course that took 5.5 hours. It was titled Retire by Design, because at retirement planning is so crucial and critical and way different than maybe what you did for retirement. See, a lot of people accumulate money in traditional IRAs and 401ks in the market. And as I explained in previous episodes here, the steps, all too often people sort of paint themselves into a tax trap. They paint themselves into a corner, and I have to free them from that tax trap. And so in the previous episodes, I've given you glimpses of what we teach in this 5.5-hour online course. There's actually a 40-page workbook that comes with it. If you stay with me to the end of this episode, I'm going to show you a way how you can actually get this 5.5-hour Retire by Design online course absolutely free, including the workbook. Also, I want to gift you a copy of this 300-page best-selling book, The Laser Fund: How to Diversify and Create the Foundation for a Tax-Free Retirement. In these 5 critical steps, we've talked about getting the clarity on the why, the big picture in retirement, so that you can enjoy your golden years and not worry about your money, and also not ruin your children and grandchildren on whatever you leave behind. Understanding equal opportunity trust versus equal distribution. In the second critical step, we talk about strategic tax planning and how to get money out of those tax-deferred IRAs or 401ks with the least tax impact. Make sure you watch that episode. You'll understand how to save yourself maybe $250,000, $500,000. We have saved some people over $1 million of unnecessary tax performing strategic rollouts, not rollovers. In the third step, we talked about where to reposition that after-tax money into a properly structured, maximum funded, indexed universal life insurance contract so that it qualifies to be a laser fund. Now, not all IUL policies would qualify to be laser funds. A laser fund is an indexed universal life. But I would say that over 99% of IUL policies would not qualify to be deemed a laser fund. You have to structure it correctly and fund it properly. So I'm going to show you how to do this and also explain the indexing feature that I strongly recommend. Indexing has been around since 1997. So the fourth critical step is designing your laser fund using max funded indexed universal life and utilizing indexing strategies properly. So get ready. I'm going to show you some examples of this, and then hopefully you'll want to view the entire 5.5-hour online course and stay with me. I'll show you how you can obtain access to that absolutely free. So folks, in the third step, I ended by using this metaphor of a bucket because years ago when E.F. Hutton, who was credited for being the brainchild behind the emergence of universal life to be structuring a life insurance contract for living benefits to accumulate your money tax-free, turn it into a tax-free cash cow where you're taking the least amount of insurance the IRS will let you get away with and putting in the most money the IRS allows as fast as they allow. I compare that to a bucket. So you design one of these so that it can accommodate the amount of money you want to be grandfathered to put in there. So the examples that I give is like a bucket, and you want to design it to hold the amount of money you want to put in there, whether it's $500 a month or $10,000 a year or $100,000 a year or $500,000, $1 million. And so you determine the amount that you want to be grandfathered to put in there. You don't have to put that much in, but it would behoove you to do so. So when you do this, you're designing it to be able to accommodate, let's say, $500,000 or $1 million. And then the tax citations, TEFRA, DEFRA, and TAMRA that we talked about in step number 3, that dictates the minimum death benefit required to accommodate this amount of money so that it stays tax-free under the 3 sections of the Internal Revenue Code, Section 72E, 7702, and 101A. If you have not watched step number 3, be sure you do that. So you have to fill up the policy or the bucket in accordance with TAMRA guidelines if you want to have tax-free income the rest of your life. Generally speaking, that means if you want to put in $500,000, the most you could put in would be around $100,000 if you're over age 50. You can put in a little bit more than that if you're under age 50. But you put in $100,000 the first day of the first year, another 100 the first day of the second year, and then another 100, then another 100, and in the first day of the 5th year, that's 4 years and 1 day later, you now have maximum funded it in this example. You don't have to do it that fast, but that's the fastest you can fill it up in order to have tax-free income ever after, okay? So that is called the TAMRA tax citation. This is all in compliance with TEFRA, DEFRA, and TAMRA. TEFRA and DEFRA, as we explained in step number 3, dictates the minimum amount of insurance that has to be attached to the account based upon your age, your gender, and your health. Even if you're unhealthy, if you qualify, you can squeeze it down because when you fund it correctly, the actual cost of insurance gets cheaper as you get older. I've had people who have had these for just 20 years and it cost 1/20th what it did when they were 20 years younger. Have you ever seen an insurance policy that gets cheaper as you get older? It's because you haven't seen one designed to self-insure. If I put $500,000 in, that $500,000 will double in 7 to 10 years to $1 million. The original required death benefit if I'm 60 years old is only $1,250,000. Now $1 million of that is my own money. They're only charging me for the net amount at risk. The remaining $250,000, you'll learn about this when you go through the 5.5-hour Retire by Design course or when you read my book. When that $1 million doubles to $2 million, now you are self-insured. The insurance has to be ahead of your cash value, and now it's a tax-free cash cow under these 3 sections of the code. 72E allows you to accumulate that money tax-free. 7702 says, golly, every million can generate $60,000, $70,000, $80,000, $100,000 of tax-free income for as long as you live. That's 7702, how to access your money tax-free. And at the end of the day, when you die, Section 101A says whatever's left in the bucket will blossom or increase in value and transfer income tax-free. But you have to comply with TEFRA, DEFRA, and TAMRA tax citations, or else you'll sort of bugger it up. It will move out of the tax-free sections of the code over to the taxable section called investments. You don't want that. Investments are also usually subject to market volatility, and I don't want that. So here's how we recommend you design your laser fund. You want to link your returns to an index or indices that the insurance company actually offers. So let me show you why. Here is the worst 12-year period since the Great Depression. We call it the Great Recession. And so in November of the year 1999, let's say that you had accumulated $1 million in your IRAs and 401ks, and they were invested in the market like so many Americans had their money in the market just at the turn of the century. What happened? After 9/11, the terrorist attacks of 2001, people with money in the market saw that $1 million nest egg in this example dwindle in value. From 2001 to 2003, the average person lost about 40%. That million went down to 600,000. Whoa. It took 4 years to make back what they lost. And they finally thought, okay, now I've had to put off retirement 7 years. They felt like they had lost their future. And then they were ready to retire. And what happened in 2008? As Warren Buffett put it, he said when the tide went out in 2008, it revealed who was swimming naked. In 2008, most Americans lost 40% again for the second time in a decade. It took 4 years to make back what they lost and come back to where they had 1,046,000 to show for their million 12 years earlier. Now, people who had laser funds and used indexing, they may not have made anything during the downturn, but they didn't lose. Their money stayed up here. And as soon as the market turned around, they started to make money right after they didn't lose any. And they made money, and many of them doubled their money at this point when most Americans were barely back to break even. And then in 2008, many people with laser funds were going, go, go, because they weren't losing a dime. And the first 90 days of 2009, they locked in gains of 16% tax-free after not losing a penny. At the end of 2012, many of them had $2.5 to $3 million to show for the million they started with, when most Americans were barely back to break even. So this is the beauty behind having money exposed to risk in the market, where it goes down, and a 40% loss has to be followed by a 67% gain to get back your money. And then it happens for the second time in a decade. What is better? See, indexed universal life insurance contracts did this. That allowed people, instead of getting this pathetic rate of return in the market, which averaged less than 1/3% during that 12-year period, people using indexing, as I indicated, the green here, they may not have made anything, but they didn't lose during these downturns. See that? But as soon as the market turned around, they started making money again, and they ended up with 130% instead of 4.68%. What does that mean? Let's go back clear to 1975, the year after I started. I started in 1974 as a retirement planning specialist. If you had your money in the market from 1975 until 2010, the end of that lost decade, you would have had 5.6 million, and it would have been a roller coaster ride. You would have had a lot of heartburn during the ups and downs. If you had money in indexed universal life, this is what it would have looked like. You wouldn't have lost money when the market went down. You wouldn't have had any heartburn, but you would have ended up with 8 million instead of 5.6 million. What would you rather have? In other words, instead of having 5.6 million with all the topsy-turvy ups and downs roller coaster, and by the way, that's tax deferred in an IRA or 401k. That's not your money. A third of it belongs to the government, 1.7 million. Your net is really only 3.8 million. Would you rather have this strategy or this one where you have 8 million without losing money during the downturns, and 8 million is totally tax-free? Sound too good to be true? No, you need to engage yourself in the Retire by Design course workshop and read the book, The Laser Fund. Indexing Simplified is simply this. Let's take a snapshot in time, and let's say you have $1 million of cash value inside of your bucket, your universal life insurance policy. These insurance companies are earning a rate of return based on AAA, AA bonds, mortgages, on shopping malls and skyscrapers. And back in the 1980s and 90s, golly, interest rates were high. I never earned less than 11.75% from 1980 to 1990 on my laser funds. But now interest rates are low. These insurance companies in a low interest environment are only earning maybe 4 or 5% average. They need one of those percentage points for themselves, but I can net, let's say, 4%. Anytime I want, I can tell the insurance company, hey, just pay me the 4% this year. I think we're headed for a recession, and they'll pay me the $40,000. And at the end of the year, I have $1,040,000. But anytime I want to link to an index, I feel bullish about America, I can tell them, hey, don't put my million at risk. Keep it safe in your company earning 4, but I'm willing to give up the 4%. You can take the $40,000 that you're earning in interest, and you don't have to hold on to that for me. Just make sure my principal's safe. And you can take that $40,000 and they fund an options budget. And if I link it to the S&P 500 or the Dow Jones or the Russell 2000, these are called indices. You'll learn about them in the book. They take and they buy upside options so that they will have the wherewithal, so that if during that period of time, it's usually 1 year point to point, if the S&P goes up 10%, they'll pay you 10%. If it goes up 12, they may cap it based upon the price of options, or you may choose a no cap strategy with a threshold. This is what has allowed many of our clients to lock in gains of 8%, 12%, up to a cap, or sometimes there is no cap. So let me show you actual rates of return using indexing. So before I show you an example of a typical statement, if this is intriguing you, subscribe to this channel. Click the bell so you'll be notified every time I post an in-depth answer to a financial question, which I do almost on a daily basis. But also, I want you to watch all 5 episodes, all 5 critical steps that you should consider before retiring. And this will allow you an avenue to be able to get this 5.5-hour online course, Retire by Design. But stay with me till the end. I want to gift you a copy of my most recent best-selling book called The Laser Fund, over 300 pages of information. So folks, here is an example of an actual statement. You diversify into superior strategies. So here's a client that had 20% of their money. Let's say they have $1 million in there, and they have $200,000 in each of 5 different strategies. 20% of it could just be earning the 4% in the general account portfolio. But here, this is an actual statement, and it says, oh, on this 20% of your money, you earned 14.89%, 16.5% on this portion of your money, 10.25% on this fifth of your money, 15.07 on this fifth, and 13%. Do the average, folks. This is where many of our clients have averaged 11, 12, even 15, 16, 20%. In fact, there are periods, as of the recording of this episode, it's the year 2021, we've had many hundreds of clients that already this year have locked in gains of 25 and 30% and even 61.33% because they linked in March of 2020 during the temporary crash due to COVID-19 pandemic. 1 year later, they were credited 61.33%. We had clients that had $850,000 in March of 2020. And 1 year later, they had $1,380,000. They made well over $500,000 in one single year tax-free. That's using indexing. So that's why I call Indexed Universal Life a financial Swiss Army knife. It is actually the dream solution, not just for retirement planning, but for all kinds of goals. Yes, it's good for death benefit. It's really good for retirement planning, knocks the socks off of traditional IRAs and 401ks. But college savings, this will outperform a 529 plan by far, and it has way more flexibility and transferability tax-free. You can use it as a working capital account for business, for real estate management. You can use it for emergency funds because it's actually safer than keeping your money in some bank, and it passes the liquidity test better than even banks and credit unions do. You can use it for lump sum capital transfers, estate planning, pension maximization if you're a school teacher, a police officer, a firefighter, tax reduction. Folks, this is the dream solution. So here's how you can claim your free copy of this book called The Laser Fund and empower yourself and be able to gain access to the 5.5-hour online course, Retire by Design, absolutely free, and get the 40-page workbook. But simply go to laserfund.com, click on the link below, contribute a nominal amount towards the shipping and handling. I'll cover the rest of that. I'll fire out a copy of this 300-page book to you. It's actually 2 books in one. This side is 200 pages, 14 chapters with all kinds of charts and graphs, explanations. If you're more of a right brain learner, you flip the book over to the orange side, and this is about 100 pages, 12 chapters with 62 actual client stories of how this is a Swiss Army knife for many financial goals. So claim your free copy of the book now, and when you do that, you'll enter our database and be notified when we teach these educational webinars absolutely free, and by attending one of them, you'll then be given the opportunity to be able to get the online Retire by Design 5.5-hour course at no charge. So here is to your brighter future.